Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Classy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today, here in Studio 5 of the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, I'm very pleased and happy to be talking with an excellent guitar player, musician, and friend, Mr. Scott Ballantine. Good morning, Scott.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for being here. You got some playing to do around town in D.C. and a house concert tonight. I've heard you play before. It's always a pleasure and just amazing. So appreciate your time. We'll be playing with Andrew Fay once again.
Yes.
And I guess what I'd like to just start off with is sort of the usual thing. When do you first remember music in your life? Some people start when they're very young. Some people take lessons. Some people had music in their families. Their parents played. Their siblings played. Their parents didn't play. They listened to music. When was kind of the first thing you remember about music and your trajectory as you kind of went along?
There's very little music in my family, actually. When I was real small, my mother had this little, one of those little 45 record players for 45 RPM records. And I was fascinated with that. And I remember all the records that she had, which were not that many. But she had Carousel, the musical, on 45s, and South Pacific on 45s. And then a few odds and ends. And she had one 45, singing the blues. I never felt more like singing the blues.
Yeah.
that song, and it wasn't the country version. I forget who. Marty Robbins had it. It was somebody. I forget who it was, but it was the more pop version of it. But I played that over and over and over again as a real little kid, and that was probably the first sign that I had some sort of that sort of direction.
How old were you then?
We're talking 4, 5, 6 years old.
Had to drop that needle and all that.
Yeah. I've ever since I've been fascinated with records and have collected them, and I have thousands and thousands of them. And I was a record dealer, for years and that sort of thing. So that record part of it really stuck. As far as playing music, I played trombone in grade school and high school or junior high.
Through school. And took lessons.
Yeah. Took lessons through the school, and I enjoyed that. I don't have any real solid feelings or memories about it. But when the guitar came along, that was it. I dropped everything else pretty much.
How did it come along?
It came along in early junior high. I wasn't the sort of person that got invited to parties, but somehow I ended up at a party with other kids, a nighttime kind of party. And it was really intimidating to me. And of course, I was starting to like girls and that kind of thing. And there was a guitar there at the thing, and I picked it up, and somehow I was just fooling with it because I was really so inept at the party thing, and I'd never really been to one before. And there was a guitar there, and I took the E string, and right away almost I could figure out how to go dun 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 dun.
Wow.
And I just sat in a corner and did that, like over and over. It was really cool. I had not been around a guitar before, and I think a girl came by and said, wow, you play guitar.
Ooh.
And that was it. I've been writing that ever since.
Yeah, what else do you need? My gosh.
Wow, you play guitar. And I, of course, didn't play guitar, but I could play the little Rolling Stones lick. And that was the start, honestly, of the whole fascination, I think.
So then did you go out and get a guitar and start?
Yes, I traded I traded my trombone, much to my parents' horror, for a cheap, that was called a Stella guitar, but it wasn't like the cool old Stellas. It was some new thing made by Harmony, I imagine. It was pretty hard to play, steel string guitar, and that was it. And I started learning.
So were you a person who, or are you a person who kind of learns by noodling, or did you go out and take lessons? Or you just listen to records a lot to learn guitar? I
had a couple of friends that played and took lessons. This is right around when the Beatles hit, you know, and it was in the air. There were a lot of kids, you know, taking up guitar. And also, besides the Beatles, there was Peter, Paul, and Mary. Yeah, was big, you know, in my little circle. That kind of thing.
Very singable, playable songs.
Yeah, and they seemed like they appealed to me as people. You know, probably more so even than the Beatles and Stones and that kind of thing. That I loved Peter, Paul, and Mary and the way they looked, and you know, the whole.
So did you get in little like groups that you played in, or bands in high school?
Yeah, I started learning on my own, and I wanted to finger pick. You know, this is kind of a long answer, but I was learning little things from friends, little Peter, Paul, and Mary things, like, you know, freight trainee sort of stuff, and then I called around Indianapolis, Indiana, to music stores to see if they had a teacher that fingerpicked. I didn't have a driver's license yet or anything, but there was this one store that said, yeah, we have a guy, you know, come on down. So I signed up, and my mother took me down there and to this store, and it was a fellow named Tommy Flint. Tommy Flint was Merle Travis's first cousin. And he was from Muhlenberg County, Kentucky, and he was the real deal.
The real deal.
And he played just like Merle. I mean, who I had never heard of. I wasn't aware of that kind of fingerstyle guitar. But I started liking it. He was really good. He wasn't a great teacher.
Was it Travis picking that he was doing?
Well, you could call it that. I don't know what to make of that description, honestly. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's what people back then called Travis picking.
Wow, that was pretty fortunate, huh?
Yeah, it was really fortuitous that I got with this guy. Tommy's got to be a very famous guitar educator. He ended up in Nashville. But he wrote many books for Mel Bay. He wrote the Chet Atkins book that's very famous, the Merle Travis book, of course, that's well known. And then he wrote 5, 6, 7, 8 other guitar instruction books.
So you took lessons once a week or every couple of weeks for
once a week,
a year or two? Or
something like that, Yeah, he started. This is the story of my life. He started wanting me to get into reading music, and as soon as he started that, I quit, which happens with all my students too, to this day. You give them that book, that's the last you ever see of them.
Yes.
But yeah, so I learned these really pretty complex Merle Travis things. Tommy, this is in the mid '60s. Tommy was a kind of pioneer with tablature. And he used tablature, and I was able to learn this stuff.
So did you play out with bands in high school? Or did you start playing around at parties?
I didn't play in
that?
bands. I didn't play in bands, and I didn't play at parties. I was never a party type person in Indiana where I was. I mean, I didn't fit into that exactly. I had a mate, a friend named Tom Harlan, and Tom was played similarly and was a fantastic harmonica player.
Wow.
I mean, he had been a child prodigy harmonica player in Lynchburg, Virginia. He had his own little TV show and stuff, and
No
somehow
way.
they ended up in Indiana, and he and I got to be best friends. And what happened was with me, the guitar thing led me into a lot of deeper folk music stuff. I remember like it was yesterday buying my first John Hurt album.
Oh, Mississippi John Hurt. Oh,
and my first Doc Watson record. And I especially remember my first Dave Van Ronk record.
Ah.
And somehow or other, that Dave Van Ronk kind of school of
right,
guitar and folk music and blues really caught on with me. And I didn't realize it at the time, or didn't think about it, but it was a much harder edged approach, to American music than most people were doing. He had all kinds of elements like Nina Simone and other jazz elements that other folk singers did not have. Plus, there was a kind of political approach to Dave's music. Mm-hmm. It was very political in an odd sort of way.
Did he learn from Gary Davis?
He learned quite a lot from Gary Davis, but he also learned from jazz people, and he was a true New Yorker.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read Elijah Wald's book. It's very good.
I know Elijah Wald and follow him.
Well, he wrote he helped with the, I think, autobiography of Dave, mayor of Greenwich Village, mayor of McDougal Street, I think it's called. And anyway, but I got really caught into that. And then from there, went deeper and deeper into the blues and stuff, old-timey white, folk music, that sort of thing. And really immersed myself in that. I went shortly after high school. I was deep into it and went to IU, Indiana University in Bloomington, which has probably at that time, probably the foremost folklore department in the country, and this incredible folk library of folk music.
Yeah, my cousin, Henry Glassy, was there for a long time.
I think we talked about that. Yeah. And the library was incredible. There would be collections of like Junior Wells in Southside Chicago bars recorded by some grad student.
Wow.
There'd be 80 hours of that. There was one, Neil Rosenberg had been a student there. He's a kind of famous banjo player and educator, but he did I think he got a PhD from there, and he did his dissertation must have been on Bill Monroe. There was like 150 hours of live Bill Monroe on reel-to-reel tapes. And at that time, a student like me, I could just go in there and ask to see him and put him on this little reel-to-reel player, and that's where I did all my homework
so you
in
really,
the folklore library.
You studied music at university and
I did. I wasn't a music major. I wish I had been, but I wasn't. No, I was an English major there, but my main passion was music.
And in college, did you play with a group? I mean, or
yeah,
with a harmonica player? And
yeah, Tom and I had a string band with some fabulous people. There's one rather famous guy that was in our band named Dan Gellert, who's really well known in old-timey music circles these days. Ry Cooder did a piece on him, a TV piece.
Wow.
And we did that. And then I moved back to Indianapolis, and I started playing in bands with drummers, and I loved it. And it enabled me then to, we were doing like Little Walter stuff, and, that kind of thing. And I started a band called The Strugglers, and we played for probably 20-some years in Indianapolis. Never achieving any fame, but we played a lot, and we stuck to our guns. We never ever did a song overtly to please an audience in the way we were talking about earlier. That kind of cultural recognition trigger you can use with as a musician, where you play, you play that song, you play "Take Me Home, Country Roads," and all of a sudden, you
bring in the audience.
You bring in the audience.
It's something
that way.
they know.
Yeah, we regarded that as cheating, and we did not cheat. We never did. We did songs that we didn't write, but they were suitably obscure.
Yeah, well, I certainly I've heard of the Strugglers, and so I guess you were sort of an institution there for a while.
We were, yeah. Of late, we do these reunions, and hundreds of people show up, which is ironic because when we played, our memory of a Thursday night at the Hummingbird Cafe, where we played a lot, there'd be 11 people there, and all these hundreds of people would say, I came every time you played. And we go, really? I don't remember you.
And then didn't you also have a record store or something like that?
I had a vintage guitar shop. I started in the 70s, kind of about the time that term vintage was floating around initially. And it was a beautiful time to be doing that because there were guitars you could get.
I betcha.
And I used to just have a wild array of really nice, old American-made guitars. It's impossible almost now to do unless you have a trust fund of some giant proportion. You can't do it. But it was neat. And,
So you got bit by the guitar bug pretty early, and music became kind of your life,
right.
Your main passion and what you did. I mean, why was that? Do you think? And in a way, what did it give you, or what is your?
I don't know. It gave me. I would describe it as being a sense of who I was, and it wasn't just musical. It was sociological and political. At least the way I approached it, and the people I was around approached it.
In what way do you mean?
I don't know what I mean. It just was who I was. Music.
It led to interaction with people who had similar interest, and
it was what I took. Yeah, and it was what I took pride in. It was the achievement of my life. I remember. You're a lawyer. I went to law school, and I was a lawyer in a firm, and they found out that I played music, and they wanted this band that I was involved in to play at one of their functions, the law firm. You can already imagine how much fun this was. But one of the guys came up to me and said apologetically, I'm sorry, you have to do this at the party, And I said, you mean play in the band? And he said, yeah, I'm sorry that you have to do that. And I said, you don't get it. This is the best thing I do.
Yeah. Right.
This is the hardest thing I do. It's much harder than being a lawyer. You don't understand.
I understand that.
I know you do,
mean,
but I was telling him, you really don't get it. But this is what I do. The lawyer thing,
Yeah, that's an interesting point because there is a lot of people who just feel, wow, you have a musical ability or talent and you just do it and you wow everybody with that. But it takes a lot of time and intention and thinking and diligence. To me, that's what I'm learning as I'm picking up the guitar at my age.
It's really truly all a matter of time spent on it. I mean, for 99% of us, I've just spent a huge amount of my time in my life playing guitar, and if I'm not playing, I'm thinking about it. I'm listening to records, or now, of course, you poke around on the internet and find all this great stuff. It's the golden age of information.
And you've taught music.
I've always given lessons, even when I was a lawyer. Not so much then, but I've always had students, and it's a big part of what I've
So
done.
what have you noticed, or your perspectives or perception of the way music affects people, maybe when they're starting off playing and then they learn, or when you see people get out and go play with a band, or, I mean, do you have sort of thoughts about how, maybe even people in the audiences, when you start playing this song versus that song, how does music affect people from your perspective?
Well, where I thought you were going with that question, and then I'll try to answer that, was with the student thing and the teaching thing.
Yeah.
There is one thing I would like to say. There is a kind of logarithmic effect when you teach over the years. And I hear this all the time, and I see it all the time. There are a number of people that I have taught over the years that have gone on to be professional musicians. And there's this really satisfying, gratifying sense you get from that. Because they're bringing joy, in their own way. Every week, every night, they're out playing just like I am. And they, of course, they develop their talents, and et cetera, on their own. But I feel like I had something to do with it. And it's a way that there's been a kind of logarithmic effect in teaching other people to play that it's just real gratifying. And every now and then I get a really neat thing happens where somebody will come up, often someone I hardly even know, and say, "Man, you changed my life."
Wow.
And I go, what I do? What I do? And they'll say, the guy just the other day in Indianapolis came to hear us play, and I knew who he was. I remembered his name, but he used to come in my store. And it was like that. And he said, you changed my life. And I said, what? He said, you were in your store, and you were talking to somebody, and you were playing. And you were playing guitar, this real cool guitar thing, and it was like an epiphany to me. And he said, I at that moment, I knew I could do that. I could play guitar. I didn't have to have a job, a straight job.
Yeah.
I could play guitar and have a nice life and make music, and that's what I've done, and it's worked out. And I just wanted to thank you.
Wow, that's amazing.
So there is. I tend to, that's one compartment of that answer to your question. As far as playing out, I don't know. It's a mystery to me, how to affect people. To this day, it sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and it's just very mystifying and frustrating.
You'd be playing to a group and they just sit there and
stare at you. Yeah.
looking at their phones and
right. And yeah, that happens a lot. But every now and then you really connect with an audience. And Andrew and I talk about that all the time. It's one thing we like about house concerts, although those don't always work either. Sometimes those, I will use the word, devolve into a party,
Right.
And it's not a concert. Sometimes you just can't hold them. If there's, people are drinking and having fun, and I get it, I try not to take it personally.
Yeah.
But that happens, and I think it probably happens, to the very best musicians in the world. You've heard the story of Joshua Bell, an IU grad, the violinist playing in the subway here in D.C.
Oh, right, yes.
And he made $32.
Yeah.
And he's the greatest, probably, living violinist in the world. And, and he made $32 for 2 or 3 hours work. There's an incredible guitar player named Ted Green in L.A., and he died a few years ago. He was of the highest level guitar player. Guitarists know who he is, serious guitar players. And he didn't play out very much. He was more a teacher than he was a player. But there's one video that I just love, and it's Ted Green playing solo jazz guitar at probably a wedding, and there's all this noise around him, and he's playing this gorgeous jazz, solo jazz guitar, and no one is paying any attention to him. Nothing, and it's inspiring to me to see that, because it just reminds me that it's not the quality of what I'm putting out. It's just the vibe and the situation, whether or not you do connect with people. But when you do, it is intoxicating.
Yeah.
When you do make that connection and really feel like you're touching people, or they really are getting what you're doing.
They're actually hearing the music,
right, and feeling
and
it,
what it means,
and feeling what you're putting out.
That somebody is bringing that. Yeah, I mean, what you said about being able to have people be touched by what you've done. You've been sharing music in ways that you didn't necessarily intend, but that have actually changed people's lives, and they go out and they bring joy to people through music. I think that story about the playing at a wedding and nobody's listening. But if there was no music, people would be standing around and there wouldn't be the same vibe at all.
That's true. And I spent a lot of my life playing like solo jazz type guitar at functions like that. So I'm well aware of that. When you do that, you are an important part of the ambiance of the situation. But yeah.
It's an interesting thing about, the power of music. We do ignore it so often. It's in the car, it's in the, I guess maybe not so much in elevators anymore. Haven't noticed, but I have music on at work. A lot of people do, and it's there. If it wasn't there, it would be kind of a sterile environment in a sense. And so what you and others in bringing that gift of music to people have done has been valuable to everyone.
I think too, don't you, that our society, just the way things have evolved, we're spoiled, and we've heard so much music. Even people that aren't interested in music, we've heard so much. In our 50-some years of being cognizant humans, we've been exposed to so much. And so people are kind of jaded. Mm-hmm. It's really kind of it's not gotten any easier to involve people in music. It's gotten harder to me because people are very jaded. They've heard it. They've heard it all. I saw Hendrix.
They just expect it to be there.
Yeah, and whatever you're doing, it's really hard to. It's just hard to get people's attention. These days. I've noticed it's harder and harder. Like you said, people looking at their phones, which I do the same thing.
Yeah.
But
we're all distracted.
Yeah. And people, there's so many distractions these days, and it's not going to get any better. It's just going to get worse as technology takes over our lives. So I don't know what the future of it all is. There's more people playing out than ever. And there's probably, at least in a town like Indianapolis, more live music happening than ever before.
Yeah, it does seem like there's music all the time, everywhere.
Yeah, it's expanded. There are more people playing it. What I noticed, this might be, I might be wrong about this, but it seems to me that there's a lot more people, a lot more levels of musicianship represented in people playing out. When I first started, if you played out, you were a musician.
Yeah.
I mean, you weren't just messing around with it. Uh-huh. You were, the guys, the people, I should say, that played out were musicians. You heard music, they were musicians. Well, now it's not necessarily like that. I mean, you can go somewhere and it's just kind of obviously people that are, it's their hobby or, something like that. But they're out there getting paid, they're out there playing.
I mean,
there's a lot of that there didn't used to be.
A lot of people that I remember first going to Blues Week, Davis and Elkins College with, we're all students. Next thing you know,
they're gigging.
A lot of them are gigging.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do that now. And
they're gig snatchers.
It's really fabulous.
Uh-huh.
So, one of the things we're really just trying to do with the Planetary Gig Society is have these conversations, because we know how powerful music is. I mean, it's been powerful in your life. You've touched people's lives. They've made people's lives better. And so, it's really great what you've done in your life and what you continue to do. Really appreciate it. I don't know what else we can do, but I guess we're all trying the best we can.
Yeah, we try to get out there and make some music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really appreciate it, Scott. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Sure thing.
I loved hearing about that, and look forward to actually having more conversations about it.
It's always lovely to be here in lovely downtown Bethesda.
All right. Thanks very much, Scott.
Take care.
You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.